Good. We got this going. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Lytle, the Director of Programs at A Time to Heal. We're excited that you are here, and we are going to be joining with Anne to talk about when somebody you love has cancer. So before we get to Anne, I'm excited that our Executive Director of A Time to Heal is with us this morning for a short time. So Brenda Helget is our executive director, and we're excited that she's here and she wants to say a few words.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome from California, all our people from California, from Nebraska, wherever you may be at the moment. It's kind of a cloudy day here. Hopefully, it will clear off later today. But welcome again. We're so glad you're here. And I am absolutely delighted to introduce our speaker today. So, Dr. Ann Jones, she is a PhD, she is an RN, and she's a program specialist at Wings of Hope Cancer Support Center in Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is just across the river from us here in Omaha, Nebraska. She serves A Time to Heal in so many ways. She has been a member of our board of directors in the past. She has been a facilitator for a long time for our Survivorship 101 program, and she has become a facilitator for our Navigating Brain Fog program. She is so good at being a facilitator that our co-founders, hand selected her and only four other people as a facilitator trainer, so a trainer of other facilitators for both of our programs. Anne is also playing a really key role in the development and implementation of our Time to Heal's caregiver pilot program, which we're very excited about. And she'll talk a little bit more about that. But I also wanted to relay a quote from Anne that so aptly describes her and why she does what she does right now and why she loves it. She said, "My dream job included being present and listening to the stories of caregivers and survivors. My role is to take those sacred moments and creatively develop meaningful programs that are helpful to others facing the cancer journey." So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ann Jones.
Hi, y'all. I'm going to just go right into my presentation and get started. It really is a joy to be here with everybody. All right, now I just have to share. If I can. Okay, do you see the presentation? That's the question. Somebody tell me.
No, Ann, you know what, folks? Isn't technology great when it works?
Hang
We all struggle with it, but you know what? It's Saturday morning. We're all friends here. I hope you're in your most comfortable clothes. I hope you're having a cup of coffee and enjoying yourself this morning. So here we go. And we can see it now. It looks great.
Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, we will have, as both Brenda and Kathy said, if you have questions, I absolutely can see nothing except for my screen. And I can't even see myself, which is probably a good thing. And so I want this to be a very much of a conversational kind of piece. We could go on all day long, but we do have just an hour, and I want to leave plenty of time at the end also for conversation. But as I said, if you have anything that you want to go over, then, and any questions, comments, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So as we get going, some of you may actually be cancer survivors. You may be cancer survivors who are now caregivers or were caregivers, or you could just plain be caregivers. This is just information that is good for everybody, but I do want to make it, the focus today is really talking about the person that's going through caregiving. And so when you love has cancer, your life changes too. It's a journey that both people go through, even though it's a different cancer experience for both. Um, you may not quite have received the diagnosis, but suddenly the days of organization, making appointments, treatment, medications, all the emotional upheaval, test results and decisions of uncertainty, somewhere along the way, we pick up and we say, what is happening to me? And so today, when we're talking about this person, this is the person who is doing the caregiving. All right. That is what I look like, just in case you can't see me. Brenda did mention I do work part-time at an organization called Wings of Hope, but I do my work with the Time to Heal and Wings of Hope under the auspices of something I call Health Forward LLC. It's just um, my little business, if you will. And we don't really care too much about that. What we want to do is to jump right in here. And I want to talk a little bit about the Care Partner pilot project that Brenda mentioned just a little bit. This past year, A Time to Heal was very interested in taking a look at, are support groups the right thing? What do the support groups need to look like? Do we need to write a book? Do we need to write a curriculum? What it is that we need to do to be able to support. So that's why we called it a pilot project, was to really take a look at what would be most beneficial to caregivers. And through surveys, through interviews, through information that we brought together, one of the most outstanding things is that emotional support was the clearest, most consistent need that individuals had. They didn't. They caregivers don't always acknowledge that. But after the fact, when they start processing their own experience, they learn that sometimes their needs are as just as strong in the emotional health department as the person that has cancer, and that has been proven, I guess you might say, also through many research studies, including my own that I had to do a couple of years ago. And um, not only, of course, are caregivers trying to manage their own emotions, they're also trying to help understand and work with their partner, care partner, which can be spouse, etc. We use that term loosely for anybody that you're caregiving for, that they also have strong emotions, as you all know, going through this. Now, other reoccurring needs that we found through our surveys, our interviews, our support groups was respite. How in the world do I get respite? Not only, maybe an overnight respite, but how do I take care of myself when I don't feel I can leave the person that I'm caregiving for? Counseling and coaching, which also kind of goes along with navigation. How do I get through this system? And information. And interestingly, not just plain information, but information when I need it. How can I get the information on demand? Finances, and you've all probably heard of financial toxicity, not only affects the cancer survivor, but also the person who is doing the caregiving, because an awful lot of times the resources may be the same, but they also, if not the same, so like in a partner situation, there may be adult children that are having to pony up financial resources also. And then just learning how to ask for what we need. Many people feel very isolated, and we'll talk more about this, but we learned that isolation is very, very strong. And then care partners are also wanting all the practical help, coping tools, respite, navigation, etc., that we've already talked about. So in our project, well, let me move on here. Some of the things that really did surprise us was that the emotional support that care partners really wanted, but didn't sometimes know that they needed, or didn't know, again, how to ask for it. The information, kind of already talked about that. Coping tools. Many people could identify that they were stressed, stressed generally. Sometimes they could name very specific things, but what are the coping tools that people need? Navigation through not only the health system but through the whole process. And I'm going to talk just a minute about needing different navigations during different times of the cycle. And then who's the quarterback? A lot of people have nurse navigators in the program. Some people could identify their medical provider, but in the end, a lot of the care partners felt that that job, the quarterback, ended up being on their shoulders, particularly when there was a new diagnosis or during the whole treatment phase. Where the model that our care partner model and our pilot project, one of the things, or some of the things that we struggled with, just to be honest, was that groups were inconsistently attended. And we definitely found that new diagnoses, along with the treatment phase of a cancer journey, was completely different from the needs that when people ring the bell, if you will, and move out of that primary treatment phase. So into the post-treatment phase, the needs for caregivers were different. Also learned that in the more traditional support group, that a 1 hour felt way too short. And people also wanted support, but did not always show up for it because other needs of other people were more important at that particular time. In my doctoral research, there is a very strong component, and this came out in the interviews that we did with select individuals, that there is transition periods all the time through the whole cancer journey. And one of the things that was very interesting was to find out was that the care partner and the survivor had different kinds of processing moments. And what I meant by that is that when the caregiver enters into caregiving and the diagnosis is just given, here's the treatment, and how many times do the treatment plans change during the course of treatment, and you thought one thing and you just were getting to the point, things change. It's a constant, never-ending, episodic kind of change. And that affects both survivors and caregivers, but it affected caregivers more than we really expected. And the caregiver is in that initial phase of, as I say, diagnosis and treatment, where they're doing a lot of things. They picked up more roles. There's many more tasks to get done, and paying attention to the person that you're caregiving to, it just becomes a lot. So it becomes survivor mode. Not a lot of time to think, not a lot of time for extracurriculars, not a lot of extra time to spend on self. But what does happen is that after that post-treatment transition occurs, that is the time that caregivers really start to process the experience and what is happening. Fear and worry are always constant. They may become a little bit less constant because of the intensity of appointments and scans and not so many places to go, but the fear and worry are replaced by different kinds of fear and worry. That is actually kind of the same as with survivors also. Care partners, when they start to process their um, their experience, they start describing changes in their identity from all angles: emotional, mental, physical, social, spiritual, the whole thing. The result of all of this is it becomes really a moving target. And a quote from somebody in that I interviewed was, a new normal is not a new normal. It is defined and then redefined and then redefined again. So there's four areas that I'm going to work with today in talking with you. So, and again, jump up if you have your own examples. When coping with emotional stress, and I want to talk about that because it was the number one thing that kept creeping up, no matter which cycle or which phase of the caregiving experience was going on. And most people don't even stop to recognize what they're actually carrying. But the things that did come out in retrospect after the processing of the journey um, shouldn't probably surprise anybody. Fear and uncertainty, um, hypervigilance of always watching, waiting, and wondering, um, guilt. Should I be doing more? Constantly, how am I measuring up as a caregiver? Am I doing enough? Could I do more? Um, by the time we get to that post treatment phase, people are so tired and exhausted. They just want to turn off, they just want to turn things off for a while. They just want it to go back and be normal, but it's never going to be normal again. There's a lot of sadness, anger, frustration, sometimes resentment. And a lot of times these feelings don't get communicated back and forth, or nobody knows that it's an okay thing, or where can they go find somebody that can listen to them. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And caregivers don't often feel that they are worthy of, their loved one just went through cancer or is going through a lifetime of cancer. So what is it that I need to be, why would I need to seek any kind of support whatsoever? And caregivers often also feel very responsible for keeping everybody okay. And, I like this little quote from the surveys and interviews I did. You can love someone deeply and still not love what caregiving asks of you. As the person with cancer did not ask to get cancer, the person caregiving did not ask to be thrown into caregiving either. And immediately, as I say that, there are some individuals that are probably going, feeling, well, no way. That makes me, if I thought that way, I would feel guilty. But it's an honest feeling of some individuals. But what we do know, and the hope part of all of that is that loving someone and feeling overwhelmed with the caregiving, they're not opposite, but they do and can coexist. So coping does not mean making the feelings go away, but what can help, or what individuals in what research shows, is name the feeling. And oftentimes we don't, we just know we feel bad. Our gut, our head hurts. We have other physical symptoms that come out, but a lot of times that's our physical body taking the brunt and showing our emotional need. And just being able to name that feeling, or beginning to name that feeling, gives us back a little bit of control. And so, also being in the moment of what is happening today, many individuals have found that finding ways to be able, sometimes they don't even have a choice about staying today because things change so quickly. That gets less so as we move forward through the day, but staying with what's happening now and trying to bring our racing thoughts into the moment seem to help. And there are various ways to do that. Protect small pieces of your own life. Oftentimes, caregivers, um, they give it all up, if you will, and they feel guilty if they go have a golf match with a friend, or go for just coffee for 15 minutes, or have to give up their, some hobby. And we strongly, in the whole coaching and navigation world, try to impress upon individuals that they probably have help that can come in to give them a few moments of respite. But you have to protect some of those things that are your own life, even if it's just one little small thing. What else has been proven to help is to move. And when we say move, some people see that as exercise, some see that as the evening walk, but keeping moving is important. Also, on the flip side of that, though, is getting good rest. Another thing that we can do is breathe. There are so many courses out there. There are so many YouTubes. There are so many ways that we can breathe differently. But just taking out a 1 minute out of your day just to go, okay, I'm going to clear my mind and transition from what I was doing to what I need to do now to let my nervous system reset. And going outside. Nature is the biggest healer that we have. Even going outside, of course, it's pretty doggone muggy here where we live right now, but being able to even look outside at green space. Breathing and nature are two great things that go together also. And then finding that someone who can truly listen. We don't need to have a lot of advice. We don't need to have people telling us what to do, but we need to find that someone who can listen to our story, to listen to the narrative of what's going on. When it's inside us, it stirs us in a way that we don't necessarily understand. And then it sends signals to the brain, alert, alert, alert. But when we're able to get that story of ours outside, doesn't matter what part of the story or what's going on with us, but just to get it out of our own body is very therapeutic. And there's no reason why therapists, something that we call, you might have heard of, as companion coaching and counseling. There are places that you can be listened to, and you probably have a good friend that works just the same too. What often makes things harder is trying to be strong all the time. But that's the first thing that we try to do, is as a caregiver to be strong and have a strong backbone. And because we have to be the emotional stability for our loved one and for all of the family around us who may be scared of the cancer diagnosis. We keep everything inside. I just talked about that. That is one of the worst things that we can do for our own physical and mental health. And believing that you need to do it alone. It's very hard to ask for help, but there are people standing and waiting to help. And there are so many resources, and I will share some of those at the end here with you, about where you can go, so we don't have to do this alone. Um, Living constantly in the what if, that's a natural thing that we do at, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if What if the medication doesn't work? What if our person's going to die? Those are strong questions, but maybe they're not realistic to bring up in the moment. And that's staying with what's happening today. Because an awful lot of times, what if is not based in reality. And waiting until you are completely depleted. If you can imagine yourself as a battery, um, if we don't charge up, if we don't plug back in, if we don't take those rest moments, we will not be any good for our caregiving responsibilities. And a quick check in with yourself. People don't stop to do this, but this is maybe one of the strongest questions that you can ask yourself when you're in a time of chaos or things just don't feel right. Are you sleeping and eating and functioning reasonably well? If you are isolated or irritable, have you socialized lately, or what's your mood like? Another question to ask yourself is, have I stopped doing almost everything that used to restore me? So if you read, um, if you go for a walk, if you meet with friends, have you given all those things up? If those are things that you like to do and have restored you in the past. And how much fear or stress are you carrying that you don't seem to be able to put down? Meaning, is are you on high alert? Is your check in with your physical body? Do you feel like you're about to crawl out of your skin? We hear that an awful lot when we're working with caregivers. And then would it help if I had someone walk beside me and exploring about what does that mean? Do What we don't spend a lot of time on thinking about is there is another group of people that extends beyond us as the primary caregiver. There are people that want to help. There's other people that run away. There's no question about that. But are there people that are out there that can support you and that you feel can support you? And sometimes that turns out to be a navigator, um, um, just somebody in who, people like me. I work with people all the time. Do you need that kind of assistance? Is your neighbor, et cetera, et cetera? You can identify. Other things that sometimes are helpful are, if you think about it, prayer and meditation, music, journaling. This is some people like to write, and this is a good opportunity to get your story down on paper. You don't always have to have someone walk beside you, but maybe there's different routes to skin that cat. So the second thing, when do I ask for help? Um, the answer to that is that you do not have to wait until you are falling apart, because you do deserve help. That second tier of people, which might be family, might be friends, might be neighbors, that are willing to support you to be able to support your care recipient, or your survivor. And thinking of help as support for staying well. It's not proof that you have failed. And a lot of times we set ourselves up for, we are either going to succeed or fail in our caregiving responsibilities, and we don't have to look at it that way. What we do have to look at is, how do I stay well for doing my caregiving responsibilities? And that is so important, that self-care piece, even though it gets shoved under the rug an awful lot. So asking earlier and preparing for that maybe you will need help, that makes things a lot more manageable. Um, and rather than waiting until later when we all feel impossible. I will never forget one of the caregiving. I have as much caregiving experience personally as I have with 40 years of being professionally as a nurse. But I also know I've been in these situations. Obviously, I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to be able to do more when I'm taking care of my father. Well, not necessarily true. I learned when I became human, when you have a little bit of a panic attack and then you can't do anything. So, luckily, and that's an experience that I went through some years ago. And it taught me very much how to ask for help, how important it is to ask for help. And I think we've kind of talked about this, but needing help is not a measure of how much you love a person that you're caring for. Not at all. And it's more a how do we get more to be able to help the person that we love get the care that they need and give us the care. It has been proven in research, and I like to stress this, but in the research that's out there, they have proven that how well the caregiver does will reflect in how well the survivor does, particularly in the post transition, the post treatment transitions. So, what kind of help do I need? It's really helpful to try to be specific about what you need, to really sit down and ask yourself the question: do you need time away? Do you just need somebody to listen without fixing things? Because most of the time we have the answers of what we need to do. We just need somebody to listen so that our parasympathetic nervous system can take over so that we can do our own problem solving. It's taking care of us and then moving forward with knowing what it is that we need to do. So sometimes, again, just that person listening. Do you need practical help with meals, transportation, errands, appointments? Specifically, are those things that could help? Do you need time away? Um, do you need information? What information do you need? Do you need information about how to interpret the medical lingo? Do you need help to or information just about how to quarterback through the health system? Do you need help with paperwork? There are resources out there to be able to help in all of those arenas. The emotional support, again, counseling, financial. There's a lot of hidden, um, there's a lot of financial toxicity out there, but there is also a lot of financial help that is hidden. And it's just a matter of digging and finding some individuals that can help in that way. One situation that I can remember that was helpful was to engage AARP, and they have a lot of resources to help people in the caregiving arena too. Okay, and then help communicating with family and friends. It sure seems tiring to have to communicate the same information to so many well meaning people over and over again. And it's something that our survivor gets exhausted with also. But being able to, the message of this particular slide is, can we specifically name the things that we need in the moment? What do I need? The third area that I'd like to look at today is getting the resources that you do need. Again, starting with the need, and then we pair that with the resource. It seems like there's a lot of resources out there, but then sometimes it seems like there's no resources out there. And the number of times that people, meaning caregivers, have asked if I'd only known about that. there's a big fat notebook or a big fat book that somebody might have given you in the beginning or given your survivor in the beginning. And so all you need to do is like thumb through all that information, right? Well, that's not where your energy is at the moment. And then you, down the road, when that information might be helpful, you have no idea where to even locate it. Or maybe that big fat notebook went into oblivion in the back of a closet somewhere because you didn't think that you would need it. So that's where when individuals in the surveys that we did and interviews and such a sort was, I need information on demand. And so how can we get that information on demand? Well, first of all, naming the product or the problem. What is the hardest thing that's going on right now? Or what is the greatest need that I have right now? And so that helps determine what kind of information or determines what kind of resource and social support is needed. Is it informational? Is it emotional? Is it something practical, etc.? And we compare people up with whatever the need is at the moment. If for whatever reason a specific person or organization cannot help, that old advocacy thing of keep asking questions. Keep asking questions. Who is the right person to talk to? And you'd be surprised sometimes at where one question can lead you to the next person, can lead you to the next. And then when you do find the resources that work for you, keeping that personal list for yourself of what works for you handy is important. That might include phone numbers or a website, whatever the case may be. And we're going to go over some resources here at the end. Now, what we kind of ask you to do, is build your own resource map. And people that you can ask, particularly if you're at the hospital or in the oncology office, there's asking for an oncology social worker. Most places have one. And a care navigator or a patient navigator or a nurse navigator. A lot of places have that person, or a nurse on the oncology team. Sometimes a primary care provider can help. Having a counselor and therapist can help you with resources, and then also a plethora of caregiving support organizations, which I'll show you in just a little while. What are some of the questions that you might ask? Who can help me with XYZ? Walking in and asking, is there someone who helps caregivers? Who can help caregivers navigate what they need? Where can I get respite? That is becoming a question that is coming up more and more. People needing a little time away so that they can plug their battery in to recharge a little bit. And that's not just, sometimes that is just being away from the caregiving experience for just a little while, other questions: who can help with financial paperwork? Are there support groups or classes that I can go to? And what should I know about the next stage of this journey? Not necessarily about the next stage of cancer, but what do I have to look forward to of what I can expect? How am I going to feel? What are my tasks going to be? Very common for groups, four big transition times in a caregiver's experience is: number one, when that new diagnosis and during the treatment time. The second one is when I referred to when the bell was rung, or in some places they blow a whistle, but the post-treatment time, that's a whole new transition. Sometimes there's a transition into the advanced cancer stage. that when cancer becomes a chronic illness. And then there is the time of end of life or bereavement, the before and after. So those are four very distinct times with different needs for caregivers. The fourth being, how do we communicate with our friends and our family? Sometimes people don't know how to interact with our cancer survivor or with us, because a lot of times we're seen almost as the same as the survivor. It's just kind of like we're one entity, even though we know obviously we have two different people, two different sets of needs, etc. And this is, the person, I mean, people want to help all the time, and they'll say something like, let me know if you need anything. Well, what is that? What does that mean? That is not very specific. And so sometimes we have to communicate with our friends and our family about our needs, and that kind of ties back to what we talked about before, and that is, we have to kind of identify, and we have to step up in a way where we have to ask for help. So how many times have you experienced people offering advice when really all you needed was listening? Um, and sometimes caregivers may step back, or I'm sorry, family and friends may actually step back because they're the ones that are uncomfortable. And that brings up, sometimes can bring up a level of resentment. Why do they do that? Um, for lots of reasons, and it doesn't seem natural, but it happens. And so how do we work with people? How do we communicate with family and friends who do that? Maybe we don't, maybe we just let them go, but nonetheless. And we may not always ask, because we do not know what to ask for. We don't, um, and that's okay too. And in the end, when these kind of scenarios happen, it ends up in frustration while we still are caring deeply. The gift that I would give people, if I could, was just to um, stretch out there and to be specific about what they need, and ask. If somebody asks, oftentimes people do have, they want to help in some way. So if we could turn, us as caregivers could actually turn our, when you're asked, how are you doing, or they'll ask how's, every once in a while they'll ask how you're doing, and you say, oh, I'm fine. Not really true most of the time, but that's what we say because we feel guilty, or many other feelings, um, or other answers, or things like, we're oftentimes, this was from the interviews and surveys and what have you, oh, we're just taking it day by day. um, Individuals will say, let me know if you need help, and our response a lot of times is, I don't want to bother you, or we'll let you know. Why not try really trying in saying, okay, yeah, could you just sit with me for 30 minutes and just listen to me? Could you just be with me, instead of saying I'm fine when I'm not? Or if somebody offers, tell them what you need. Could you bring dinner on Tuesday? That would help me so much. Or could you pick up my child from daycare? That would help so much. And could you take me to the appointment? Or I don't want to bother you. Well, what about, I need an hour to myself? Could you just stay? Could you just give me a little bit of respite? Those are just examples, but to be very specific in the moment. And it's okay if you're the one who's saying, I'm not doing very well today, and that's all you have to say. But go the extra step and say, it would sure help if I had blah blah blah. here's some things that have been thrown out there that help, and here's things that do not. Um, and how to communicate to your family and friends. Listen before giving advice. And in fact, ask what would be useful. Offer something specific. Respect the caregiver's no. If the caregiver can say no, they don't want to do X, Y, and Z, or can't do X, Y, and Z, etc. And then have them keep checking in after the crisis. One of the things that I think that would be so helpful is if we actually had a class for the second tier of supporters. We're not the primary caregivers, but we can support and help be part of the village that um, is just a little spoke of being able to help people get through the cancer experience a little bit better. What doesn't work very well, and unsolicited advice, or how many times have you had people that said, "Well, at least, they're doing a little bit better today, and they're out of the hospital." It's not very helpful. And then how many times have you had people come through and say, "Oh, well, I know my aunt had breast cancer and this is what they did." Each individual person's experience is different, whether or not it's the survivor or the caregiver. And then you always have those individuals that disappear because it makes them feel uncomfortable. If they just show up, that is much better and much more appreciated. And then making the caregiver manage your feelings. I can think of several different stories that we don't have time for now, but I feel so bad that your husband got cancer, and then start crying. Um, Crying with someone is different than trying to make the caregiver um, responsible then to manage your feelings along with, while they're just trying to hold it together for them and their survivor. Okay, I am going to I'm going to show you some different resources that I think that are really good. But here are four top books that I think are probably the most stellar, that have helped individuals, or individuals that I know in my practice have said are the best. And the one that I want to point out here is a book called Loving, Supporting, and Caring for the Cancer Patient. If I could give every new caregiver a book, this would be the one that I would point to. And by the way, um, I will make available a one sheet that can be sent out to people with these resources on it. The other resources, and I'm going to show you what this looks like in a minute, but these are resources that have been put into a local flyer by A Time to Heal for caregivers. And a lot of these are local. We will be able to send that out to you also. Resources for care partners on a more national level. There's a nancyslist.org, which she has put together across the country a bunch of resources, but also people that are willing to provide free services like counseling and coaching and acupuncture and healing touch and all the integrative therapies that can possibly come up with. American Cancer Society has a very helpful resource guide. Cancer Hope Network, I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. They serve both survivors and caregivers, but in particular, they have a mentoring program that will try to match caregivers. They do it for survivors also, but it's a peer support program where they'll match caregivers with other caregivers that have gone through as situation as they have. Okay. And then, so just some one final thought is that caring for someone else should not require disappearing from your own life. Your well-being as a caregiver is very important. Support is not a luxury; it's a necessity. Asking for help is one of the top caregiving skills that we can um, learn if we don't know it, and allowing to have your needs, boundaries, and feelings are most important. Now, questions and conversation, but I want to stop sharing or I'm not going to stop sharing, but I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment and pull up a couple of other things. So bear with me. This This is a resource brochure and in, it's not in draft form, but what it is it's work in progress. And we can send this out to individuals, but we have listed, I'm so sorry that I'm not on my other computer. We had a flaw or a problem, so I'm on my backup computer. But this is a resource brochure that we will can also send out to you. This in particular comes from the Cancer Hope Network, the Mentor program, which didn't get spelled right, but that's okay. This is what their flyer looks like. Again, Cancer Hope Network. Um, this is one we didn't really go over anything for children, just really didn't have time. But there is a local resource, and this will only pertain for Nebraska, but Grief's Garden, where they work with Katie Ransdale, works with children who have experienced grief because of a parent, grandparent, or someone um, uh, dying. This is the American Cancer Society caregiver resource guide. It's 100 and I believe it's 153 pages. It looks more like this, but again, I will put this in a flyer that can be sent out to everybody. But it's very helpful, particularly in the beginning of what to do to support yourself, but then also information, treatment, that type of thing. Okay. I am going to stop sharing now.
And I do have a question in the chat from Lynn.
Okay.
And she asks, how do you deal with the rejection when you ask for help? For example, you ask the patient's friends to come to stay for a week so the caregiver can go to care for her parents as well.
Okay. Can ask me the first part of that question again. I got the last part, but it
How do you deal with the rejection when you ask for help?
you know, that's going to happen. And it's a hard one um, to work with. I will share an experience that I personally had that you know, I have a family member who could not help take care of his own mother, and it was my stepmother, but he just did not want to remember her in a way of being sick, and he just couldn't. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't. There was no use fighting about it, and what we and you just have to know that that's going to happen. And sometimes, well, for me, I needed to talk that out. And so part of that was talking it out, but then moving on to find somebody else that could help. And there were friends that that stepped in that particular way. There are not as many as you would like, but there are some organizations out there that will provide respite care. There are some that cost. You can always find cost. And sometimes there are, if you have, there are nursing homes. I say that plurally, but there's not very many, but there's nursing homes, and there are places that will do, are in rural areas, there's swing beds that rural hospitals will take in. But again, that's a huge cost. I'm not answering it very well. Is there anybody um, in the audience that has any ideas or stories? I guess one of the things, that question may very well be, how do I deal with it emotionally? And that's another one of those places that finding somebody to be able to talk to about it and to problem solve with. The organization that I work with, called Wings of Hope, does something called companion coaching and counseling. There are other organizations that do that too, but we have a couple people in that organization that works through some of those type of things.
And Anne Lilly had sent a question prior to the her question was, how do you support a patient who wants to manage their medical care independently and does not want a caregiver involved?
As long, several different things I would say about that. Caregivers, uh, it depends upon what the person that you're caregiving for, where are they at? Are they totally cognitively, can't handle things because maybe they have cognitive deficits? Are they just having an independent streak? So that you can't take away people's independence, and particularly independent choice. So the question then becomes, is there a way as the caregiver to be able to give any kind of control to the person who needs the medication? If that's not possible, then sometimes there's tough love and trying to explain to that person that I'm sure doesn't always work, but um, you have no choice but for the safety of the patient to be able um, to say, no, I'm sorry. And I have to do this for you because I'm concerned about your safety. And that doesn't always go over very well, but what you're dealing with is somebody who wants, who needs control, and everything else has been taken away, most likely from them. And sometimes it helps to have a medical provider talk to that person also.
So I do have Ira reached out in chat and says, has there been thought to have caregivers, vendors come together to show the public what they offer and how they can help you? Maybe a caregiver fair?
Well, interestingly, let me tell you about this. And I don't know that it's even possible, but the CDC, Brenda, as she was telling me earlier, the CDC, the Nebraska Cancer or um, Comprehensive Cancer Plan, all of the people that were supportive of the Care Partner pilot, is going to fund a second year. And our plans for the second year is to be much more action oriented. So, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to expound upon the resource brochure and try to pull together more resources that are out there and we're going to try to segment it according to the different transitions that care partners go through. So, newly diagnosed, treatment segment, and then the post treatment segment, etc. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we are going to do support groups again, but we are going to segment them in and have special topics that go along with each of the series of those. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to have a couple of care partner workshops, if you will, and they'll be virtual. And then the last one is that in May there is always a survivor conference that's put on by A Time to Heal, and there will be the opportunity, right, Kathy? I bet you this is going to happen. Is that we're going to invite vendors to come with their tables, and a lot of times there are the exhibitors, if you will. So we will have a push because I will be part of the program, so I'll make it happen, and invite people, care partner vendors, to do that. What I'd like to see, and Ira, I don't know, this would take a little bit more, and I don't know that this can get done anytime real soon, but there's nothing like a virtual vendor fair also, which would reach many, 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 many more people. I'm going to, one other thing that I'm very excited about is there are the gurus nationally, two of the gurus in Care Partner for cancer patients and survivors are an Allison Applebaum and a Nicholas Odom. And they have secured national funding for kind of their workshops, but they're training and helping organizations to establish better care partner programming and what works with all the research and all of that good stuff. Anyway, Nebraska is going to get to have a tie to that because I've been accepted to go and participate in that particular training and grant and workshops and the whole 9 yards. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. So
What,
Ira
Kathy?
also mentioned, he says, excellent presentation, Anne. I love how you weave in quotes to let us know what is important. Super job.
Thank you, Ira.
Is there any other questions? While hearing none, I want to thank Anne for all this information. It is so, so helpful. And also, I want to remind everybody, we will be sending you out the resource brochure and all this good stuff. And Anne, somebody had asked about sharing your slides. I'm sure that we can share your slides too.
Yep.
So, okay, perfect.
Absolutely. And I'll get them sent to you too.
Okay, perfect. So you will be getting an email with all that good information in. And I just want to thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you join us again for another Create Your Best Life. Our next one is Saturday, September 19th for advanced care planning. So it's a good information. So thank you all. Have a good weekend.